here's something we all know is true and almost none of us fully practice. The truth will set you free. So we have heard since childhood that we have nodded at in the therapy sessions, self-help books, motivational quotes, and then we go about our day telling the small comfortable lies, the quiet half truths, and carefully curated versions of ourselves that keep the peace and manage the impression. Today, someone who has spent a career in storytelling asks the obvious and uncomfortable question: what if we actually meant it? So, hey, dear listeners, welcome back to another powerful episode of Healthy Mind, Healthy Life. I'm your host, Avik, and today's guest, please welcome Alan Katz. So, welcome to the show.
It is my pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Amazing. Amazing. Thank you so much for joining us today, Alan. And um, before we delve deep into the discussion, dear listeners, I'll quickly love to introduce you to Alan. So, Alan is the writer, producer, and the creative mind behind projects including HBO's iconic tales from the Crypt and the host of the How Not to Make a Movie podcast, which is named Best Film Podcast of 2022 by Entertainment Weekly.
Indeed, it
So he
was.
has, yeah. And dear listeners, he has spent a career inside the business of human stories. And somewhere in all of that, he arrived at a simple and genuinely radical conviction: the truth will set you free. So there are a lot of things to discuss today. I do not want to take much time of yours. Let's get started. Welcome to the show again.
So much ground to cover.
Exactly.
Well, I I stumbled upon the fact that the truth will set you free. I ended up keeping a secret from myself for 45 years that at the end of the day, it was the reason that I was able to succeed, but only up to a point, because if you're keeping a secret from yourself, you are detached from yourself. And at certain key moments of truth, when you need you to be there for you, you won't be there for you because you can't. You are disconnected from you. And that, I, I guess I was born with certain lucky attributes. I've always been a writer. I've been a, I've been writing professionally since I was 16.
Wow.
I always took writing for granted, though, and I wanted to be an actor. And when I went to college, that's what I thought I was going to be. But I went to one audition after college. I was terrible. I didn't really prep for it the way that I should have. But my young male attitude at the time was, what kind of an idiot tries to make their living as an actor? I'm going to go back to being a writer. The only other thing I knew how to do. And yeah, and I did okay. I subsisted, I think is the way that I would
Yeah.
put it. But my aspiration at the after college was to be in the theater in New York. I had a friend from school. I grew up in Baltimore on the East Coast of
Yeah.
the United States, and went to school outside of New York, so I was really East Coast centric. I had a friend who I grew up with who had moved out to Los Angeles, and she had become a literary agent at William Morris, one of the most powerful talent agencies in the world, in the business. And she knew that I had gone back to writing, and she said, "Why don't you try writing a screenplay?" So I did, and she said, "Yeah, it's pretty good. You should come out and meet and greet people." So in June of 1985, excuse me, I flew out for a week of meet and greet. Now, as a burgeoning New Yorker, to me, Los Angeles was the stupidest place on the whole planet. It was the land of the avocado head. But New York, the whole East Coast
Right.
of the United States in June is hot and humid. New York, especially if but there's a place that you walk around, it smells like piss and just not a very pleasant place to be. Los Angeles, by comparison, there's no humidity. It's the desert. The weather's really wonderful, and the people were so nice. They blew copious amounts of smoke up my backside. It was really quite intoxicating. I People were really nice at the meetings. One night, my agent, Carol, took me to a movie premiere, a movie called St. Elmo's Fire. They represented the movie, and I had this backstage view of this world that was, wow. And suddenly I went from hating LA to, uh-oh, I moved out the next month. It was New York. Screw New York. And LA is where I wanted to be. And among the first people that I met that first week that I was in Los Angeles was a guy named Gil Adler, who became my best friend and my creative partner for a decade. Now, Gil wanted to write, but he didn't have the discipline to be a writer, but he was a great creative producer, great instincts, and he had trained as an accountant. So he understood if you have $1 to spend to make your movie, your TV show, your show, do not spend $1. One, you haven't got it. Now, if you can make your movie, TV show for 99 cents or 98 cents, make it still look like that $1, this is good. Better yet, if you can do it for 97 or 96 cents, make it look like $1.01 or $1.02, you're on to something. Gil's approach, look, the creative process is just problem solving. And Gil's approach to the problem solving of the creative process wasn't throw more money at it, it was throw more creativity at it. Well, that was exactly my solution to the creative problem. So we had a great creative relationship. And yeah, and I learned how to be a producer by working with Gil. And ultimately, he did a project for HBO called The Hitchhiker. He produced that for them in Vancouver, and they were very pleased with his work. They had a high-profile, expensive disaster TV series on their hands called, it was called the Vietnam War Story, something like that. And it had some very expensive talent. It was shooting in Savannah, Georgia. And they sent Gil out to take over. It was over time, over budget. It was a mess. He took it over, brought it in on time, on budget, and it won awards. And so Gil became God of a kind of producing God in HBO's mind. And a little while later, they had another problematic, high-profile disaster on their hands, and they wanted Gil to come in and take over. And that was called Tales from the Crypt.
Yeah.
And when Tales from the Crypt had started a couple of seasons before, they wanted Gil and I to come in and take over the third season. When HBO had first started airing Tales from the Crypt, when they first entertained the notion of it back in 1989, they were still movies. They had a couple of original programs that they created for themselves. A thing called First and 10, another called Dream On. These are basically just single camera shows with nudity and profanity. If you took the nudity and profanity out, they were basically just network ready shows. There was nothing larger than a TV show about them. Suddenly, these 4 mega Hollywood producers, Joel Silver, Richard Donner, Walter Hill, Bob Zemeckis, approached HBO with a passion project from their youth, a comic book collection. The EC comics, the horror comics, Tales from the Crypt, a thing they loved from their boyhoods, they wanted to bring to HBO. But the vision was to take a feature-sized vision of this passion project and put it inside HBO's TV box. And HBO jumped up and down and said, do whatever you want, guys. And when you make a TV series, there's a way to do it because of just the way that you have, if you're going to try to make them consistent and how you just budget them and schedule them, there's a way to do it. You have to create a little factory. Well, they didn't do that. And they didn't go through any kind of development process. How do you take a franchise like the EC Comics, a very distinct look, a very distinct storytelling style, distinct everything. How do you take all those franchise elements from the one medium, comic book, and put them completely into a different medium, a TV series, so that it looks seamless, so that the TV series feels like the experience of watching the TV series feels like the experience of reading the comic book. How do you replicate that? Well, it doesn't happen by magic. People have to do that. There's a process. You recognize the elements and all right, you bake them into the script in ways. The way that you write the scripts has to be redolent of everything that you want your creative team to feel as they go about doing their jobs. It's it's a whole creative process of problem solving. Well, no way, nobody had done that. And so the first 3 episodes are great that they did. The back order of the first season was 3, so the total first season was 6 episodes. And HBO was so happy they ordered a second season of 18 episodes and a third season of 13 episodes. And the executive producers went about their business of making their TV show. Still no development process and no factory process to how they spent the money. The night before the second season wrap party, HBO handed the executive producers a financial statement since they've been cash flowing the whole thing. Well, normally the way that you finance a TV show, whatever
Yeah.
whatever an HBO or whatever the network is that's playing it, every time they play it, they pay what's called a license fee to the people who made it. And uh, whatever that first time license fee or the second time, the third time, add them together, it still is not going to equal the cost of production. So, what you need to make the whole thing work financially is someone to take the financial risk. They're called a deficit partner, and they're the ones who are going to take the financial risk by financing the production in hopes that somehow it gets to profitability in one of the various ways that it can get there. Most don't. It's a risky, risky venture. So because they usually you go out and you find your deficit partner first. Well, the executive producers never did that. HBO, in essence, became their unwilling deficit partner. When the HBO handed the executive producers this financial statement the night before the wrap party, the executive
Okay.
producers canceled the wrap party, fired everybody, got out their checkbooks, and wrote HBO checks equaling $1 million because there was plenty of money for the executive producers in the third season that needed to get done, and they figured they'd take what had just cost them $1 million out of the production budget. So, get the third season, not only do they get paid, it didn't cost them anything. So, by the time Gil and I took over the show in the third season, everyone kind of felt that was the end of it. It was a rather cynical proposition. But Gil and I walked in the door with a very different attitude. We didn't see it as the end of something. For us, it was potentially the beginning, and we reinvigorated the franchise by going back to the roots and saying, all right, how do we take all the stuff that we loved equally from the comic books and really make the audience feel it all? So we did that. We also went after big stars to be in the show because that was part of the original vision. Feature vision inside your little TV box, so it doesn't feel like you're watching a TV show. We really wanted it to transcend that little box. The other thing we did, more than anything I did, the 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 host of Tales from the Crypt is a character called the Crypt Keeper, who has become rather world famous and quite iconic. Just as the executive producers of Tales from the Crypt did not develop the TV series in any way, the Crypt Keeper character itself kinda fell together. It wasn't again, there was no organization to it. They the Crypt Keeper in the comic books is an old white guy with stringy hair. Rather boring, frankly. The executive producers wanted their own Crypt Keeper. It just so happened that at a storage facility in Los Angeles, Joel Silver, one of the executive producers, had his big space, across the hallway from a special effects guy named Kevin Yeager. Among the other things that Kevin created was Chucky. And Kevin, when Joel saw what was inside Kevin's storage locker, he said, "You got to make a Crypt Keeper for me." And so Kevin Yeager created the Crypt Keeper puppet, which is actually 6 puppeteers working in harmony. There's the head and the main body piece, but the right arm is one puppeteer, the left arm is another puppeteer. There are actually 3 puppeteers working the animatronics of the Crypt Keeper's face. Another controls his movement this way and that way. Yeah, I think that was all of them. And yeah, they all worked in concert when the director yelled action. Um, Kevin, having created the puppet, he found the actor who became the voice of the Crypt Keeper, an actor named John Kassir. And so you had a terrific puppet, you had a great voice, but no one had ever developed the character. He was just the Crypt Keeper. No one ever asked the question, all right, so who is he? And what's he going to talk about from week to week? Whoever wrote the script for the TV series would throw a couple lines at the Crypt Keeper, more or less. And so over the course of the first 2 seasons, it was this amusing puppet called the Crypt Keeper. Well, one of my jobs, I had 2 main jobs. My first job was I was the final arbiter for every script that we did. I was the person who, I was the arbiter of what is Crypt. And so everything had to go through me. I was the final typist as it is for every single script before it went to our department head, before it went to casting, had to go through me first, every script. My other job was to write Crypt Keeper segments. And I don't know how you write for a character who doesn't exist. And especially if you want him to be funny, how do you write funny for generic? You get generic. And so just to do my job, I asked the question, all right, so at the end of the day, we all punch the time clock. We go home to our houses. All right, when the Crypt Keeper punches the time clock and goes home to his crypt, not the one that we built for him, all right, what does he make for dinner? What does he watch on TV? Who are his friends? What are his hobbies? What are his likes and his dislikes? And just so I could write for him, I needed to know who he was. Now, I had to create a personality for this character. And being a writer and therefore somewhat lazy, I reached for the closest character at hand, the closest personality at hand, which was me. Now, I grew up loving old movies. I was a fan of the Marx Brothers. I loved Groucho Marx. And the Crypt Keeper became my little Groucho. And it turned out that by investing the Crypt Keeper with a personality, he became the franchise. Yes, the stories that we told were important, but what people really associate that TV show with was the Crypt Keeper. And yeah, as his value rose over the course of that 3rd season, well, suddenly HBO wanted more seasons, and they ordered a couple more seasons, and something Universal Pictures said they saw the rising value in the Crypt Keeper, who was suddenly getting offered Budweiser. He did ads for Budweiser beer and lots of other products. And Universal Pictures said, "Hey, let's do 3 movies."
Yeah.
And we said, "Yes, please." And the first, Gil and I were supposed to write and produce the first one. Well, Gil was supposed to direct the first one based on a script that Gil and I had written, but the executive producers wanted a monster movie. We had toyed with doing a Quentin Tarantino's From Dusk Till Dawn, but we couldn't make a deal with Quentin. And in the end, we found another terrific script called Demon Knight, and we hired Ernest Dickerson to direct it. We got a great cast, including Billy Zane, Jada Pinkett, Bill Sadler. The whole cast is wonderful, and Demon Knight is a terrific movie. I'm producing. I wrote a lot of it. Didn't get credit for it, but okay, that's how the Writers Guild is. The second movie, all right, it was supposed to be the one that Gil and I wanted to do. It was neither Gil and I were horror guys. I came out of comedy. Gil came out of comedy. To me, Tales from the Crypt was black comedy, much more than it was horror. We did not want to be pigeonholed by Hollywood as horror guys since we weren't. And so we saw this second Tales from the Crypt feature as an opportunity to show the town how versatile we were. And we had adapted this script that we liked into a thing called Dead Easy. It was a taut psychological thriller about a recovered memory. It took place in the swamps outside New Orleans in the southern United States. And it had a wonderful villain, this Harlequin character, great franchise villain. Universal Pictures must have been down with it because we spent 6 months in New Orleans scouting locations, prepping it. We into casting. We had cast a young unknown actress named Salma Hayek to play the female lead.
Yeah.
Uh, 3 weeks before the start of principal photography, suddenly we get a phone call from Universal Pictures. Stop. Don't spend another penny. Get on a plane. You're not making that movie. Come back to Los Angeles.
Well,
So we flew back to LA kind of shell-shocked. What the hell? And they stuck another script under our nose called Bordello of Blood.
okay. Okay.
Now, what the hell what was this all about? Well, all right. At about the same time that all this was happening, a brand new studio had come into being called DreamWorks.
All
And DreamWorks was Steven Spielberg leaving his deal, not the lot, his deal at Universal to form this major studio. And at that being a major studio, the first thing you need to do is make deals with other talent to come aboard
Yeah.
and be part of your roster. Universal was desperately afraid of losing another big chunk of talent. One of my executive producers, Bob Zemeckis, Back to the
Okay.
Future, Forrest Gump. Steven Spielberg was his mentor. And Universal did not want to lose Bob as well as Steve Spielberg. So they went to Bob. They said, Bob, we love you at Universal. What can we do to make you stay? And Universal, they must have made a great deal because Bob stayed. I don't know anything, any other part of the deal. I know one deal point. Universal Pictures agreed to purchase the first student script that Bob Zemeckis and his writing partner for a long time, Bob Gale, ever wrote when they were at USC. These are the future Back to the Future guys. They wrote lots of very successful movies together, but this was the first script they ever wrote when they were just students at USC. $500,000 for a student script,
Yeah.
just as part of how to assemble the money package for a deal. No one had any intention of making this thing a student movie, for peace sake.
Amazing. I I have to say I really love this having this conversation. But I mean, time is constrained, but still I definitely wanted to ask one thing which I really, yeah. I mean, so suppose for people who are listening right now, right? Or maybe they'll be listening later as well. So uh, who has been carrying something true about themselves, like something real, something very important, and
Well,
they,
we are coming to the part where all of this comes
uh,
to where the bomb goes off.
okay,
So I'm just laying all the groundwork because yes, you are absolutely anticipating where
yeah,
we're going
yeah,
in making when Universal Pictures forced us to make this other movie, Bordello of Blood, instead of the one we all wanted to make. I was living a golden existence, making a TV show. Tremendous creative freedom. God, I made 75 some odd episodes over 5 seasons. HBO gave me, I got 3 notes from HBO. The network was great. Really, we had tremendous creative freedom. Everyone who did that show, looking back at their careers, would tell you that was one of the highlights, if not the highlight. But suddenly we were making a movie that none of us wanted to make for the most cynical of reasons because of a deal point. Just because Universal Pictures didn't want to eat $500,000, they said, okay, you're going to make this movie instead. And our release date didn't change. We still started in 3 weeks. The experience of then suddenly going from making a movie that was a passion project
yeah,
to making a movie that none of us wanted to make was soul crushing. And before that movie ended up being released, literally if you do any project, let alone a creative project, for all the wrong reasons, do not be surprised when every day is stupider than the day before it, which is exactly what happened, and more soul crushing and worse. From the audience's perspective, it's just a mediocre horror movie. But from the perspective of the people who made it, it destroyed creative relationships. Before the movie was released, I was no longer friends with Gil Adler. I was no longer creative partners. I'm no longer on speaking terms. We didn't speak for 25 years after living in each other's pockets for a decade. The animosity because of what this thing did to us was so great. Now, Gil went on, who's a great producer, to have a great producing career. Warner Brothers producing all their big tentpole movies, things like, God, I'm going up on all the ton of Superman Returns, yeah, the one of a Tom Cruise movie about the Second World War, about the attempt to assassinate Hitler. Huge, huge, tens of millions of dollars budgeted movies they gave to Gil. I did a couple seasons on a show called The Outer Limits as a co-executive producer. I tried to put things together, but something inside me was just broken. I went through a 2-decade-long descent into depression and a writer's block I didn't even know I was in. And 3 days before Christmas 2016, I came within literal inches of killing myself. The self-loathing was that bad. And I knew I was in trouble. After that happened, I drove immediately to my GP, my general practitioner, and I said, "Look, here's what happened. Here's what I'd like to do." Now, I knew I was in trouble. I knew the darkness had me completely in its thrall. My dad was a physician. I grew up in the medical culture, and I knew that my GP did not have the background information to prescribe really the kind of mood stabilizers that I needed. They just didn't have that information. I knew that because I grew up in that culture. And so I'd done all the research myself. I had found one that I thought would hopefully work for me. These are tricky medications. Our brain chemistry is so complicated, and even under the best of circumstances, it's still a lab experiment. And I didn't want to be a generic lab experiment that my doctor said, try this. So I told him my thinking. He said, well, that makes sense. And I told him the medication that I had investigated. He said, well, that makes sense to me. He wrote me the prescription. I picked it up. I went home. I told my family what I was going to do because it's still a lab experiment. It could end up good. It could end up worse. I took the first dose, and that's when I got incredibly lucky. Within 36 hours under that minimal dose, I leveled. I felt the medication put the darkness inside a cage, not a box, a cage. I could still see it. It could still see me, but it couldn't get at me now. And now that it wasn't, I wasn't reflexively blaming myself for everything. I could tell myself the secret I've been keeping from myself for 45 years, that on 2 occasions when I was 14, I was sexually molested by the religious director at the synagogue where my family belonged outside of Baltimore. Now, the first time's bad, but it's the second time that created the template. The second time happened because I didn't say anything about the first time. And so in the middle of the second time, my 14-year-old brain said, this is bad and it's all your fault. It's your fault. You did this to you.
Yep.
Now, that was not correct. It was not 14-year-old me's fault that an adult was using me as a sex toy. Not true. But our minds don't necessarily work the way that we need them to work. That became the survival mechanism of the moment, but it also became the template. And over the course of my life, I would blame myself, as a problem-solving technique. That just doesn't fly. Because one, if you're just going to blame yourself for it, you won't solve the problem. And if you're blaming yourself for stuff that isn't your fault anyway, you definitely won't solve anybody's problem. It's just a bad way to go about it. But now that I could tell myself the truth, to me, well, if you can't tell yourself your own story, can you really tell anybody else's story? Of course you can't. But now that I could suddenly tell my story to me with absolutely total honesty, well,
Exactly.
I could tell anybody's story. And I went from being, I'll pat myself on the back here, a really talented writer to being a storyteller. And that really goes to the thrust of what you're asking. The keeping that secret nearly destroyed me.
Mhm.
The truth set me free. It absolutely set me free. It set my creativity free. Suddenly becoming a storyteller, well, I used to struggle what stories could I possibly want to tell?
Yeah.
Oh my God, the world is loaded with stories, starting with my own. And
Exactly.
what I did in that first season of the How Not to Make a Movie podcast, because I realized that during the during the pandemic, a fan group, a Tales from the Crypt fan group, 3 guys from around the United States who are also dads, fathers.
Mhm.
They created a podcast called Dads from the Crypt. They reviewed all the episodes of Tales from the Crypt, and they gave parenting advice. And one of the dads, Jason, reached out to me. He said, "Hey, we're going to be reviewing one of the episodes you wrote. Do you want to sit in with us?" That sounded like fun. So I said, "Yeah, okay, sure, I'll do it." And it was fun. We had a great time. A few weeks later, Jason reached out to me again. He said, "Hey, we're going to be reviewing Bordello of Blood. You want to sit in?" And I said, "Jason, the telling of the story of that fiasco isn't a simple half-hour conversation with you. It's
Yeah.
ding, a podcast unto itself." And that was the impetus for why I started making that first season of the How Not to Make a Movie podcast. The subtitle was The Making of Bordello of Blood.
Yeah.
And that was my opportunity to use this medium, podcasting, and all the tools available in the toolkit, and there are lots, to tell the story in a variety of different ways, to
I really
recreate
love
the
that.
things. But because you can tell the story however you need to, I needed to tell the backstage story about all the creative people who ultimately went into it with the best of intentions and walked out with, oh my God. But the person I most needed to speak to was my old friend and writing partner, Gil Adler. And for the first time in 25 years, we talked. I said, "Look, here's the deal though. A lot has happened. A lot happened to us that we have not talked about. I do not want to talk about it beforehand. I want to do it all live on mic. Whatever comes out, comes out. Whatever recriminations, we'll say them. It's for the mic, but that's
Love
part
it.
of the storytelling." And
Yeah.
he was apprehensive, but he said, "Okay." And it turned out really well. It was,
Amazing.
and
Amazing.
that's why Entertainment Weekly called it the best film podcast of 2022. The writer, when he spoke to us, said, he had heard the podcast and
Mm.
the honesty in the storytelling, and he needed to talk to us because he wanted to make sure it wasn't bull. And we weren't just putting it on for the microphone. And he understood that, oh my God, no, well, for me, that became, wow,
Yeah.
a powerful, Gil and I began working on the TV project together, but the TV business and the film business are so screwed up after the pandemic and what streaming did to it and Netflix's impact. It's broken, broken, broken. And so while Gil and I have been pursuing projects together, getting them made, getting them financed, it's almost impossible.
Because we have a time constraint. But dear listener, but I can definitely promise you that I'll be again coming back with one more show with Alan, where we can go more than an hour. And I definitely love to listen to this because I'm also from a creative background, and I really understand uh, things that goes behind. And I totally agree, totally support, and also totally feel from inside. Still, if Alan, like if listeners wants to connect with you, what would be the best medium to connect?
Go to our website, my little company, Costard and Touchstone. We bake. Right now, we have 9 different podcasts out on the air. Our goal is to make the world a better place through storytelling. Costard,
Amazing.
in my very brief acting career, I performed in 2 Shakespearean plays. I performed the part of Costard in Love's Labour's Lost and the part of Touchstone in As You Like It. Both of them are wise fools who speak truth to power. And that's what our little company does. Costardandtouchstone.com, Costardand. Touchstone is TOUCHSTONE.com, costardandtouchstone.com. You'll find all the podcasts we've got out right now and a preview of some of the really cool ones that are coming up this year.
Amazing. Amazing. So, dear listeners, all of that goes into the show notes. Go find Alan's podcast. And I genuinely promise you that you will be glad you did. Because, Alan, I mean, this was exactly the conversation I was hoping for. Though we have to go in middle, but still, as I promised all the listeners, that will be again coming back with
Two-parter, still parter.
yeah,
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 absolutely.
yeah. Part two will definitely come on that. And I definitely want to thank you for the honesty, the craft, and the very good company for sure. So, I- for the listeners also, like everyone who is listening, or maybe you'll be listening, who stayed up late with me. I won't say it's a kind of homework, but it's yes, in that word only. Not as a kind of journaling prompt, but I'd say it's a 5-step plan. Just one question to sit with before you fall asleep. That what is the one true thing I haven't said yet, or just one. So you don't have to say it right now or tonight itself, but find it, because the truth, as Ellen reminded us, is already working on setting you free. So whether you are ready or not, so just think about it. And with this hope, come back to Healthy Mind, Healthy Life. And until next time, this is your host Avik, and tell the truth when you can. It always leads to somewhere better. So we'll talk to you soon. Thank you so much.